Lyra's breath burned and trembled against Grant's ear, mixing with the chill of the rain outside the window and the scent of warm, damp skin pressed together. Her muffled moans were smothered beneath Grant's hand as he pulled her tighter to his chest, their bodies entwined on the dark carpet, clothes scattered around the room, evidence of a storm no one could control. Out in the hallway, the soft shuffle of footsteps. Someone was searching, and just a gentle push of the door would expose everything. But in this darkness, all boundaries had shattered. Lyra was no longer the sister-in-law. Grant was no longer the perfect husband. Their bodies melted together, trembling, caught between fear and desire, as if separating now would shatter them into 1,000 pieces. Lyra bit her lip, clutching him tightly, whispering in broken breaths, "I can't stop anymore, even if everything falls apart." Grant closed his eyes, holding her even closer, feeling the thin layer of her skin under his fingertips, his heart racing with both fear and longing. The door remained ajar, but all they could hear was the beating of their hearts. Nothing existed outside of that forbidden moment. Right then, in that razor's edge between a family on the brink of collapse, everything had started with what seemed like an ordinary evening, in that very house, not so long ago. Grant Weller had never imagined that one day, returning to this house could leave him so unsettled, even though he was more than familiar with his wife's family gatherings. But that evening, the moment he set foot on the stone steps, Grant sensed something different in the air inside the house, and it all began with a single glance. Inside, warm yellow lights filled the living room, laughter echoing throughout. Grant's wife, Marissa, was bustling about, arranging flowers and cakes on the table, her smile as radiant as always. Mr. and Mrs. Quinn sat chatting in a corner, the scent of cinnamon tea drifting in the air. But Grant paid them no mind. His eyes involuntarily paused at the petite figure by the window, where Lyra had just turned around, her soft brown hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes sparkling in the light. All memories of the little sister-in-law from years ago suddenly vanished. The Lyra of today was no longer the little girl who used to cling to him, always fussing with her big sister. Before Grant stood a young woman with defined curves, alabaster skin highlighted beneath a thin slip dress, lips curling mischievously, eyes fixed on him without hiding a secret undercurrent of curiosity. That look was electric, sending a strange pang through Grant's chest. He knew this feeling was wrong, but he couldn't pull away. Lyra walked closer, her voice both familiar and somehow changed, soft as she spoke. "Hello, brother-in-law, it's been a while. Have you been well?" Grant smiled, trying to appear natural. "I've been fine. What about you? Just got back to the country." She tilted her head, her hair brushing lightly against her shoulder, her eyes never leaving his face. "I came back a few days ago. I missed home so much, and everyone here, too." Her words were sweet and ordinary, but when her gaze lingered on Grant's chest, then drifted down to his waist, and her small hand brushed his arm as she accepted a gift, all Grant's senses stirred awake. His skin tingled, breath caught in his throat, though he managed a polite smile. Marissa's loud call interrupted. "Lyra, come help your sister." Lyra winked at Grant before slipping past him, her hair grazing his cheek, leaving a trace of vanilla in the air. Grant stood frozen, struggling to regain his composure, but his heart thumped uncontrollably. The birthday party went on as usual, but for Grant, everything felt different. Lyra sat across from him at the dinner table, tilting her head back and exposing her collarbone every time she laughed, glancing at Grant over the rim of her glass, each time she took a sip. She sometimes squinted as if to tease him, sometimes deliberately letting her dress slip off her shoulder, revealing smooth skin that left Grant flustered. Amid the noisy atmosphere, only Grant felt as though all the sounds faded away, leaving only the pounding of his heart and an inexplicable restlessness every time Lyra glanced his way. When it came time to cut the cake, Lyra handed the knife to Grant, their fingers touching for a split second. An electric current shot through him, their eyes meeting in a brief but breathless, intense moment. Grant quickly pulled his hand back, forcing a smile, inwardly reminding himself, "She's my sister-in-law, she's family." But the more he tried to avoid her, the more Grant found himself noticing every gesture, every movement of Lyra. From the way she crossed her legs, her clear laughter, to the innocent way she licked the spoon, her tongue circling her lips as if unaware, though it made Grant's face flush hot. Night fell and everyone went upstairs to their rooms. Grant lingered in the living room, the TV still on but the sound distant. His mind was full of images of Lyra, her silhouette in the golden light, her laughter, those sparkling eyes. Marissa came down the stairs, sitting beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Did you have fun today, honey?" Grant wrapped his arm around his wife, trying to shake off the gnawing guilt inside. "Yeah, it was nice. Your little sister's all grown up now." Marissa smiled softly. "Lyra's changed a lot, hasn't she? She's lived in England for 4 years, and she's different now." Grant stayed silent, forcing down the wave of guilt. After Marissa went upstairs, he stepped out onto the balcony, looking out at the garden, the night wind icy but not enough to cool the heat inside him. At a window on the upper floor, Grant suddenly caught Lyra looking down, her eyes bright in the darkness. The two of them watched each other in silence, saying nothing, but it was as if an invisible string was pulling them closer. That whole night, Grant couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, his mind flooded with images of Lyra in her thin dress, her vanilla scent, those strange yet familiar eyes. Under the thin blanket, his body burned, his breathing heavy, hands clutching the sheets, fighting a new feeling he'd never known in all his years as Marissa's husband. In the room next door, Lyra was also sleepless. She lay on her side, fingers playing with her necklace, eyes fixed on the faint line of light outside the window. In her mind was Grant's image, his calm smile, gentle eyes masking so many conflicts. Lyra smiled softly, lips pressed together, remembering how as a little girl, she once wished to marry a man like her brother-in-law, so composed, so strong, yet just cold enough to make her want to reach out and touch him. The clock chimed softly, and Lyra stretched to turn off the lamp. Before drifting into a restless sleep, she recalled that fleeting touch as they cut the cake, and the smoldering look Grant had sent her across the crowd. On that first night, nothing was said aloud, but both knew. The boundary of family was as fragile as a wisp of smoke, ready to vanish with just a gentle breeze. And deep down, both Grant and Lyra understood that everything had only just begun. On his second night at the Quinn house, Grant still couldn't sleep. The faint glow of the nightlight slipped through the door, scattering flickering shadows on the ceiling, each heartbeat echoing in his chest like a distant drum. Images of Lyra drifted ceaselessly in Grant's mind, from her provocative glances to those accidental but fiery touches. Deep into the night, Grant decided to go downstairs for a cold drink, hoping to shake off his restless thoughts. He walked softly through the hallway, every footstep resounding in the silent house, guilt threading itself into every breath. When Grant opened the kitchen door, he froze in place. Lyra was sitting at the small bar, her back to Grant. Her brown hair tumbled down her shoulders, a white nightgown, nearly see-through, hugging her slender frame, exposing a bare shoulder, a delicate back, and curves highlighted under the soft yellow light. Her bare legs crossed, fingertips swirling a glass of wine. The air was thick with vanilla and red wine, a sweet and dangerous scent. Grant stood speechless for several seconds. Lyra turned, her eyes shining in the dark, lips curling into a mischievous smile. "Can't sleep either, brother-in-law." Her voice was low, husky, tinged with alcohol. Grant tried to steady his voice. "I just came down for some water." "Are you drinking alone?" Lyra tilted her glass toward him, inviting. "I'm not used to sleeping early, especially when I'm home. It's been a while since I could just sit and be still like this. Sit with me for a bit." Grant moved closer, sneaking glances at Lyra's chest beneath the thin fabric, his gaze darting up to the ceiling in an effort to keep his composure. Lyra slid over, making space for him beside her, leaving less than a hand's breadth between them. Lyra poured more wine into Grant's glass, her eyes tracking his every movement, lips parting with subtle invitation. "Do you remember when I was little, you used to tell me not to drink?" Grant let out a dry laugh, his throat tight. "I remember. You were so stubborn back then, you've changed." Lyra sipped her wine, her fingertip brushing his glass as she toasted. "I'm grown up now, I know how to choose what I want. Sometimes, the forbidden things just make you more curious." Grant stiffened, caught in Lyra's unwavering gaze. For a moment, heat rolled between them, every breath heavy. Outside, rain tapped steadily on the roof. In the kitchen, only their pounding hearts filled the air, beating as one. Lyra dipped her head, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear, revealing her ivory neck. Grant couldn't look away, his fingers gripping the wine glass. Lyra placed her hand on the back of his, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What are you so afraid of? There are only two of us here." Grant instinctively pulled his hand away, but his eyes betrayed his longing. Lyra smiled softly, then stood, moving slowly toward the fridge, every step fluid, her body swaying under the silk nightgown. She bent to fetch a bottle of water, fully exposing her bare back, mesmerizing Grant beyond reason. When Lyra turned back, her gaze was no longer playful, but a silent invitation. She handed the bottle to Grant, their hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity up his arm, the forbidden feeling pulsing stronger than ever. Lyra leaned in, her lips close to Grant's ear, her breath dancing along his cheek. "Go back to bed, no one will suspect a thing. But if you keep standing here, I won't be responsible for what happens." Grant stood frozen for several seconds, torn between reason and desire. In the end, he slowly withdrew his hand, stood, and left the kitchen without daring to look at Lyra again. But as he turned away, he heard her soft, tipsy laugh behind him. The wine, the dim light, and that seductive warning haunting him for the rest of the night. Back in his room, Grant lay on his bed, his heart still pounding, Lyra's whispered words echoing in his ears. He felt every breath, every sensation on his skin where her hand had touched him. In the dark, Grant couldn't sleep. Images of Lyra, her body, her eyes, her breath, the hint of a moan, tormented him relentlessly. At the same moment, in the room across the hall, Lyra too lay awake. She rested against the headboard, her fingers tracing her flushed skin, lips parting in a sigh heavy with longing. She pressed her lips together, closed her eyes, her mind replaying Grant's ragged breathing, the tension in his grip, his gaze filled with struggle and a heat that threatened to ignite everything. That night, two souls at either end of the hallway, separated only by a fragile line, one that could shatter with a single misstep. The afternoon rain cast a gray shadow over the whole house. Marissa and her parents were busy shopping in preparation for the upcoming holiday, leaving Grant alone at home, thinking it would be a peaceful day. But not long after, Lyra appeared at the living room door, her hair still damp, carelessly wrapped in a thin white towel over her bare body, long naked legs exposed in the faint light of the rainy afternoon. She held a nightgown in her hand, her expression innocent yet carrying a provocative glint only Grant could recognize. "Brother-in-law, I forgot my things. Have you been sitting here long?" Lyra asked, her voice as sweet as honey, deliberately not pulling the towel tight so one bare shoulder, the curve of her slender hip, and the rise and fall of her chest were left in plain sight every time she bent down. Grant fumbled, eyes glued to his laptop screen but unable to read a single word. He struggled to control his gaze, his voice rough. "I'm just working a bit. Feel free to get your things." Lyra didn't hurry back to her room. Instead, she stood close to Grant, bent down to open the drawer to get her clothes. Her breath brushed his neck, the scent of vanilla perfume mixed with freshly bathed skin making the air heavy, intoxicating. Lyra's fingertips accidentally grazed Grant's shoulder as she stood up, sending a shiver through him. Just as she was about to leave, a bolt of lightning split the sky, thunder making Lyra jump, nearly dropping her towel. Grant instinctively jumped up to catch her, his hand pressing to Lyra's waist, feeling the soft, burning heat of her skin through the thin fabric. In that moment, both froze, the world pausing for a heartbeat. Lyra looked up, her eyes shimmering with moisture, lips pressed tightly together. She didn't shy away. Instead, Lyra leaned into Grant, letting the towel slip even lower, more of her pale, flawless body exposed without shame. Their breaths mingled, the air so thick it felt like every shred of Grant's reason was melting away. "Brother-in-law," Lyra whispered, her small hand gripping Grant's wrist, her fingers tracing lightly over his shoulder, unmistakable longing in her touch. Grant closed his eyes, fear and desire warring inside him, suffocating. But he couldn't resist any longer, lowering his head to find Lyra's lips in a hurried, desperate, instinctive kiss. She didn't refuse. On the contrary, Lyra's arms wrapped around Grant's neck, pulling him closer, her soft body pressed tightly against him. They tumbled onto the sofa, breaths ragged, soft moans echoing through the silent room. Grant's hands roamed every curve, Lyra's skin burning beneath his touch, her chest rising and falling in broken breaths. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, her bare shoulder, leaving deep red marks, each movement both hurried and trembling. Lyra bit her lip, fingers threading through Grant's hair, pulling him closer, her moans quiet but haunting, ringing like a forbidden melody full of danger. Their skin pressed together, sweat beginning to bead, mingling with their increasingly urgent breaths. The towel slipped to the floor, Lyra's body fully revealed in Grant's arms, the weak light reflecting off every soft line, at once innocent and seductively mesmerizing. Rough, frantic movements soon gave way to slow, sweet, aching rhythms. Grant cupped Lyra's chin, lifting it gently to look deep into her eyes, where boldness and fear mixed in strange intensity. "We should," Grant whispered, his voice trembling, but at that moment, Lyra pulled him closer, panting. "I want you right now." Her words exploded everything that had been held back. They became one, feeling every heartbeat, every electric jolt rushing through their bodies, like two souls tumbling past the boundary of right and wrong. The sounds of their breath, the slap of skin on skin, the muffled moans bitten into pillows, all blended into a fierce forbidden symphony, overflowing with pleasure and fear. At last, when the storm calmed, Grant leaned back, holding Lyra still trembling in his arms. Their breaths slowed, leaving only the steady sound of rain against the window. Lyra looked up at Grant, her eyes filled with both satisfaction and confusion, her red lips parting in a wistful smile. "This time, maybe we can never go back, brother-in-law." Grant hugged Lyra tightly, feeling the surge of fear and guilt rising like a tide, but his body was still burning with desire, unable to let her go for even a second. That rainy afternoon, the family boundary was completely shattered, and both of them knew nothing would ever be the same again. Ever since that fateful rainy afternoon, everything had changed irreversibly. Grant and Lyra avoided each other in front of everyone, trying to act normal with Marissa. But with just a moment alone, the forbidden flame would flare up wildly, uncontrollably. Secret glances, suggestive texts, every ambiguous laugh became a secret signal between them. Every night, Grant lost sleep, replaying every second he had felt Lyra's warmth, the scent of her skin, those soft moans in the dark. In the room next door, Lyra also tossed and turned, phone in hand, typing and deleting dozens of messages wanting to say, "I need you." But in the end, she only sent a hurried photo. A bare shoulder peeking out from under the blanket, lips bitten gently, eyes full of mischief. Grant received the photo, his heart pounding. He replied with only one short line, "You're driving me crazy, Lyra." In the days that followed, whenever they passed each other in the hallway, Lyra would lightly brush her hand across Grant's back, her gaze innocent, but her lips curled in a wicked smile. She sent him provocative photos, her nightgown slipping off her shoulder, her knee pulled up high, lips pressed together as if holding back a moan. One night, as rain poured relentlessly outside and the family finished a late dinner, everyone got ready for bed. Lyra stood on the stairs, her eyes meeting Grant's at the end of the hallway, exchanging a silent understanding. At midnight, as the rain drummed against the windows, the power suddenly went out. The whole house was quiet, Marissa already sound asleep. Grant lay in his room, barely collecting his thoughts when he heard the soft click of his door opening. Lyra stepped in, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, her hair messy, her eyes blazing in the darkness. "I can't sleep," she whispered, closing the door behind her and coming right to Grant's bedside before he could react. Lyra climbed onto the bed, slipped herself into Grant's arms, her cold hand seeking out the heat of his body. Their breaths filled the pitch-black room, the only light the occasional flash of lightning casting their entwined bodies into fleeting relief. Grant held Lyra tightly, his hand running over her bare shoulder, sliding down her slender back, every soft curve tensing beneath his fingers. Lyra clung to his neck, her lips pressed to his ear as she whispered, "Don't make a sound, I want you right now." They gave in to each other, breaths quickening, bodies tangled in the darkness, every movement frantic and forbidden. Lyra bit down on Grant's shoulder to stifle her moans, her fingers digging into his back, her skin hot and quivering with pleasure and nervous fear. Every time Grant moved, the creaking of the bed made them bite down even harder, struggling to keep utterly silent. Grant's hand traced every inch of Lyra's flesh, feeling each heartbeat, each burning wave of heat. The peak of forbidden ecstasy came when Lyra nearly choked on her own pleasure, pressing a pillow to her mouth to keep from crying out. Grant held her even tighter, his lips devouring hers, their breaths, the wet sounds, the slap of skin on skin all blending with the rain outside, becoming a symphony of guilt. At last, when everything grew quiet, Lyra curled up in Grant's arms, both of them panting, sweat soaking their backs. Outside, the rain kept falling, the darkness amplifying every forbidden sensation. Before she left, Lyra leaned down and kissed Grant's lips softly, her eyes shining with a haunting addiction, a look both innocent and wild, both yearning and afraid. "I'm addicted to you, Grant," she whispered, then slipped away into the night, leaving Grant alone with the heat of her touch and the burning scent of vanilla still on his skin. The more forbidden, the more addictive. They both knew they had gone far beyond the line. But that craving and forbidden pleasure only made it even harder to stop. After that fateful rainy night, everything became more fragile than ever. Grant and Lyra tried to keep their distance when Marissa and the family were around, but the more forbidden their love became, the more uncontrollable their desire and longing grew. They gradually grew used to the thrill. Hurried touches on the staircase, stolen glances when passing in the hallway, and more than once Grant unconsciously squeezed Lyra's hand beneath the dining table with no one the wiser. Marissa started to sense that something was off between her sister and her husband. The times she caught Lyra looking at Grant for too long, or the way Grant fumbled whenever Lyra was mentioned, left Marissa uneasy, her suspicions growing day by day. She quietly observed every expression, every look exchanged between them, but still found no concrete evidence. Lyra, as if tempting fate, became bolder with each dangerous situation. She wore sheer nightgowns every evening, often lingering around the living room when Grant was there. Her eyes provocative, yet her demeanor always innocent before everyone else. Sometimes she even sent Grant short, daring messages during family dinners. "Meet me on the balcony tonight." The thrill of reading those words made Grant both anxious and exhilarated, his heart pounding every time he found a chance to secretly meet Lyra while everyone else was asleep. The forbidden reached its climax during a weekend family party. The whole family gathered, laughter echoing throughout the house. But amid the crowd, Lyra's gaze never left Grant. She deliberately wore a tight red dress, sitting with her legs crossed in front of everyone, her smile half innocent, half teasing. Grant found himself unable to look away, his mind replaying memories of that rainy night, their stolen kisses, the scent of vanilla, her damp skin, everything spinning inside him. When the party ended and everyone was a little tipsy, Marissa went upstairs to prepare pajamas for the family. Lyra quietly pulled Grant into a deserted hallway, her breath quick and urgent as she whispered, "Come upstairs with me. Hurry, no one's paying attention." Grant couldn't resist, following Lyra up to the attic storage room that was almost never used. The small room, dimly lit, was thick with lust. As soon as the door closed, Lyra threw herself at Grant, her soft lips searching for his in a hungry, urgent kiss laced with wine and longing. Grant lifted Lyra onto the table, her red dress askew, her legs wrapped tightly around his waist, their bodies coming together as if they'd never been so close before. Moans muffled by kisses, the sound of skin against skin, their pounding heartbeats, every move filled with danger. A single loud noise and they'd be discovered. Grant used his hand to muffle Lyra's mouth when pleasure made her cry out, their eyes meeting in the dark, both satisfied and trembling with fear. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the upstairs hallway. Grant and Lyra froze, clothes half undone, their bodies pressed together, nearly naked. There was a gentle knock on the door, then Marissa's anxious voice. "Grant, where are you? I thought I saw someone come up here." Grant clung tightly to Lyra, his heart about to burst. Lyra reached out to cover his mouth, both holding their breath. They heard the storeroom door creak open, knowing that one glimpse would destroy everything: the family, the marriage, their very selves. Luckily, Marissa only lingered outside for a moment before leaving, not noticing the door was only slightly ajar. When her footsteps finally faded, Grant and Lyra still stood frozen, not daring to move, their hearts racing, cold sweat soaking their clothes. That forbidden, intoxicating moment was like a final push, bringing them to the very edge of dangerous exposure. Grant knew he'd gone too far, but the feeling of Lyra's body in his arms, soft, trembling, craving, made it impossible to stop. Back in his room, Grant stared at himself in the mirror, eyes bloodshot, Lyra's lipstick still smudged on his collar. He sighed deeply, biting his lip, knowing the boundary was about to shatter. Lyra felt it too. She lay still on her bed, cheeks flushed, her breath yet to settle, eyes full of fear but still burning with passion. The truth was now only a matter of time. They both knew. A single careless mistake, and everything would collapse completely. In the days following the family gathering, the atmosphere in the Quinn house grew heavy, as if everyone could sense something unseen was quietly tearing everything apart. Grant and Lyra avoided each other even more, but whenever they passed in the hallway, their eyes still burned, aching, hungry, full of longing and pain. Just a fleeting touch, a brief smile, was enough to leave them both breathless with yearning and guilt. Marissa became distant and hard to approach, her gaze suspicious, her questions more pointed, every icy glance making Grant extra cautious with his every move. Lyra changed, too, no more mischief, no more midnight messages. She became quiet, her eyes somber, locking herself in her room each evening as if trying to hide from her own desire. But that forbidden feeling still refused to let go. It crept into every dream, every sigh, every night Grant turned his back to Marissa, feeling the gulf between husband and wife grow impossibly wide. He dreamed only of Lyra, her body, her vanilla scent, her gentle moans echoing from days past. The more he tried to forget, the more Grant remembered, the more he suffered, the deeper the ache. On that final night, the rain began to fall once more. The whole house went to bed early, but Grant couldn't close his eyes. In the darkness, he heard soft footsteps stop at his door. The door opened, and there stood Lyra, her eyes red from crying, her hair tousled and wild. She walked to his bed without a word, just sat beside Grant, her hand trembling as she gripped his. "I can't take it anymore, Grant," Lyra whispered, her voice breaking in the night. He didn't answer, just pulled her into his arms, feeling her warmth and tears soaking into his neck. That last time, there was no wildness, no hurry. They gently undressed each other, skin pressed to skin, long and lingering kisses, their breaths merging, soft moans like a sad song in the rain. Grant laid Lyra beneath him, eyes searching the tears shining in hers, his hand caressing every curve as if trying to memorize it all before everything disappeared. They made love in the dark, slowly, endlessly, every movement full of both passion and the fear of losing each other. The sound of rain outside blended with their quickening breath, soft whispers breaking into sobs. When everything reached its peak, Lyra broke down, clinging to Grant, whispering through ragged breaths, "I don't want to lose you, but I know I have to let go." Grant kissed her forehead, holding her even tighter, his heart sinking in despair. Both knew nothing would ever be the same, no matter how beautiful their love, it was wrapped in pain. And then, fate arrived. Marissa suddenly entered the room, her face frozen as she took in the undeniable scene between her husband and her sister. Not a word, not a scream, just a suffocating silence, as if every emotion had shattered into a million shards of glass. Lyra bolted upright, pulling the blanket over her naked body, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grant was left speechless, paralyzed. Every secret, every promise, every longing collapsed in a single instant. After that night, the family was broken. Grant left the house, Lyra disappeared as well, and no one ever contacted the others again. But deep within each of them, the memories of that forbidden love remained untouched, a scar both painful and sweet, never to be erased. Years later, on cold, rainy nights, Grant still dreams of Lyra, of her eyes, her shoulders, of her moans, and her bittersweet smile in the darkness. He knows, in this life, there are some boundaries that, once crossed, can never be recaptured.